Schachter-Shalomi. Before he joins us, we have a few guests here, members of our kahal, but guests on the stage, to talk to you about two of the most amazing Jewish renewal institutions in the world, alongside with David Friedman, who is the founder of the Yesod Foundation, will tell you a bit about the critical work Yesod is doing in the collection and preservation of Reb Zalman's holy words and works. I rest well at night knowing that Reb Zalman's works are being collected and archived by the likes of you. So come on up.
As Reb Zalman often says, the attitude is gratitude. Bless Reb Zalman, bless Eve, bless him, bless them both. And this week here at the 11th Kallah, I relearned the meaning of one of the great Hebrew letters, words vav, and. We each do our work and today we at Yesod stand alongside our brothers and sisters at Elat, Chayyim, and at Aleph, because we're all Reb Zalman's kinderlach. We all care about Reb Zalman and the work of Jewish renewal. So what's different about Yesod? What's different is that our sole purpose, our only focus, is to advance Jewish spirituality through the vision of Reb Zalman. And that means we energetically and financially facilitate Reb Zalman. Our efforts enable him to live out his winter years doing the things he needs to be doing, following his inner promptings to write, to translate, to publish, to train, to counsel, to experiment, a lot of experiments, to travel, to convene, to retreat, to rest, to take care of his family and his health. And all this, and he's already 3 times retired. We aim to do our part for our Rebbe, who has given so much of his life for all of us. Currently, the Reb Zalman Legacy Project is under the direction of Netanel Miles, and we're well underway sweeping the world of the myriad of manuscripts and journals and videos, lectures, photos. We're collecting, we're organizing, we're archiving them, so they're not lost. So that they're there, they become usable for the masses of people in our generation and generations to come. www.rebzalmanlegacy.org. So now back to the vav, the and. So I want to welcome now my sister, who was formerly the summer director at Elat Chayyim, the very special Rabbi Phyllis.
In the late 70s, we think, but certainly in the 80s, when B'nai Or was first an organization, I don't know if you know that the name of Aleph before it was Aleph was B'nai Or. That happened after the first Kallah. But even before the first Kallah, 20 years ago, there was an organization called B'nai Or. And this B'nai Or used to have retreats at Fellowship Farm in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. These were the early days of Reb Zalman's R&D work. His research and development is what he would call it. And he would bring us together for a holiday weekend, and for all of us who had only done holidays in shuls, in synagogues, in congregations, or not at all, we were in for an experience that for all of us we never forgot. It was on those retreats that Reb Zalman worked along with psychotherapists, along with dancers, along with yoga people, rabbinical students, a whole range of people to make an experience that, in fact, was an experience in the 4 worlds. All of his learning from his Lubavitch days about a world that was not just mind, but also body and heart and soul, we began to see and feel in those retreats. The impact of those retreats we are all seeing in our congregations in Clever Road now. And one of the impacts of those retreats was the desire on the part in particular of Rabbi Jeff Roth, who was for many years the executive director of B'nai Or and then B'nai Or with Zalman as rabbinic head. His desire to make it possible for a week like Kallah to become 52 weeks a year. And it feels like being here with David, with Yesod, and with Deb, with Aleph, that the 3 of us, part of the children and all of the grandchildren, have come for one really great, grand family reunion. I'm so proud to be here. fundraises, she organizes, she is creative, she writes. I don't know what she can't do. Here she is, our guest.
Share the stage with representatives from Yesod and Elat Chayyim. And my task, since you've already heard about Aleph, I'm not going to tell you any more about Aleph, but I do want to thank Reb Zalman. I wondered what praise is sufficient for Reb Zalman, the man that not only founded the organization I work for and conceived of this Kallah, but who laid the bricks in all four worlds for over 100 rabbis, cantors, and rabbinic pastors, whose vision is lived in the laboratories of Jewish renewal communities around the world, the galaxy, whose teachings have been recorded in over 150 books and articles, not to mention CDs, DVDs, and films, whose body of original music, liturgical translation, and wearable Judaica seemingly knows no bounds. I mean, how can you thank someone who has taken you from disaffiliated, disconnected, alienated to near from? It ain't easy, but I'll try. Based on my experience, Reb Zalman, I was in a gathering of 900 people in a huge sanctuary in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I think it was on Chayyim. He began with a nigun that I'll never forget, and I bet all of you know, accompanied by words that I vaguely remember. And so I'm going to try and replicate them. They were something like this. The nigun part is easy. It goes like this. We gather together from far and wide. I want to say on behalf of all of us at Aleph, all of the volunteers and the staff, the project directors, the teachers here at this Kallah, I'm sure on behalf of all of you here today, who have been honored to spend the time with you. All of us gathered here united in our love for Torah as we walk together with you on this path that we call Jewish renewal. I want to offer you the following blessing. Reb Zalman, may the one who is the font of all blessings sing your praises in your ear as you sing praises to her. May the life of all the worlds energize you when you are fighting, comfort you when you are wanting, heal you when you are in need. May you always have chavruta, friends to study with and pray with and have fun with, and love you and give you back even a tiny portion of all that you have given to them and to all of us, because even that tiny measure will be abundant beyond all reckoning. And may your days be filled with rest and with joy, and with the realization of your fondest dreams.
If it were up to me, I would like for you all to be enlightened right here, right now. I forgive you the full Monty of the Rebbeinu Shalom. To see and to know everything that you need to know about how to be a Jew in the emerging time to help heal our planet. So I hope that you will be ready also to receive that, because that's the purpose of this session. L'shem Yirut Kutshevichu Shim Deviyach L'shem Yute B'Rov Deviyut you, the heads of the tribes of the next generation. As you realize from the Torah reading, you have power over the word, over a way in which you can make words holy and not desecrated. And these are the kinds of things that you will be spreading to other people. Lo yachid debaro, kechol hayotze mipiv yaseh. Let him not make his word leaky, from the word halal, a whole. Let your word not be leaky, let it be strong. A word given. What an important thing it is. When we pray with such words, we can get answers. But when we pray with journalistic, descriptive words, like people write in the newspaper that today it looks like relevant and tomorrow you wrap a herring in it. Those are not the words we mean. We mean the kinds of words that are being said, Harei at mekudeshet, when you say these words, that creates a state, that creates a situation. Moshe Rabbeinu is about to say goodbye to his people. So he prepares the leadership for the next generation. And the wonderful thing is that he's looking at Yehoshua, he's looking at Kallah, he's looking at those people who after the 40 years of the desert are now coming out. We are coming out after years after the Holocaust. Those were terrible years for us, and the shock that we have been trying to recover from, we haven't quite been able to do, but that generation is about to go, and the new generation that comes afterwards is taking its place and has to deal with the trauma in a different way. Instead of krächzen over the past, we are building something. We are saying, this is the way it has to go. We are taking responsibility for the planet, not only saying, oh, yo, shikers are goy, who deals with the goy? We only need to be Shabbos goy. We are now thinking about the whole planet everywhere. And if we had really done our homework after Auschwitz, we would have done something in Biafra, we would do something more in the Sudan. I could go on and on and on. When we say it mustn't happen again, then we really have to make sure it won't happen again. We have to put our own effort into what happens all over the globe. So in a way I can say I've seen this new leadership arise, and I want to tell you those kids who are so precious. I would like to sit there and over here, and I hope I can come and fly over there when they're going to do it. When someone is going to be teaching them Hasidus and Tanya, and they'll say, I remember Chochmah when the two kids ran across the stage. To be here, to watch the snicha of my older son and his colleague, and I know how both of them had worked hard in order to overcome things, in order to be able to lead to this moment. For me, this was another Shehecheyanu. When I read about Moshe, it says, Lo yada ish et kurato. Nobody knows where Moses is buried. You know what I think? He just decided to retire. But this time he meant it. And he's a sannyasin someplace still to this day. And he is doing his inner work. And I think that that's the whole idea really of what I want to say today. I think he withdrew. So what happens when someone whom you have sort of felt invested, energy, charisma, hope, whatever, trust in, is no longer available to you? Well, first of all, I want to say you each need to have at least two things. Aseh lecha rav u'kenei lecha chaver, it says in Pirkei Avot. Make for yourself a teacher, a master, and buy for yourself a friend. Interesting language. The point I want to say, it is nowadays almost impossible to do the inner work without having colleagues to do it with. Just the same way as our way of learning is not to sit in the library and reading, but to work with Chavrusa. I was so delighted watching Reb Mordechai in the Beit HaMidrash here, to see the excitement that was generated for people and the way in which they all spoke up, and each one saw that they are as a Rebbe Amam de Omar, he has something to contribute. That's so wonderful. It is necessary for you to have Beit HaMidrash and to have somebody who's going to be your chavrusa. Whatever you want to learn, make sure that you have somebody else to learn it with. Ukenei lecha chaver is that, to have chavrusa. The other part is aseh lecha rav. About 25 years ago, when I spoke to the people at RRC, Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, about spiritual direction, they sort of looked, what does it mean? In Yiddish it would say, mit was esst man das? Do you take this fork or this spoon? What do you do with this thing? Nowadays, spiritual direction is so much already that's part of the formation of a rabbi, and that's very necessary. And I would like you each to have someone who will be that kind of spiritual friend, a spiritual director, with whom you can talk over your progress. The people in the 12-step program are no fools. They realize that if you have someone else who sort of is your sponsor, with whom you talk about the difficulties, not only the nice things that you bring, but the difficult situations you face when you're doing your inner work. Because those blind spots on the inside, they keep on changing just color and garments, but the blind spot is the same blind spot over and over again. So you need to have someone who will pay attention with you together. Make sure that you have a mashpia and a chavrusa. Because the secret of soul work is that you socialize it. Everything that you only keep inside of yourself is like the dream that you don't write down and then you forgot what it was all about, and it may have been an oracle for you, but you didn't honor it enough to write it down. In the very same way, any spiritual insight, the people at the original B'nai Or, way back at Qumran, made it an offense if you had a theophany which you did not share. How is Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, being created, if not through that sharing, where we share with each other the insights that we have? If we think it was only in the past that people could create Torah, you don't belong here. We are creating the Torah that is needed for this time, and so unless we share it, it will not be socialized. And unless your meditation isn't socialized, it's also going to disappear. So all the inner work needs to be at least brought up. That will make for sustainability for soul work. Then there is something else. The God field today in the world is very weak. And it's also distorted. It's distorted by people who haven't seen the other three worlds and only see things in literal reading of Bible. And that fundamentalism creates for the people a distortion of who is God and what does God demand of us. So that they say no stem cell research but kill people in Iraq. It's that kind of mentality that has taken the word God and dirty it so much, and we have to do something about that. So it's our job to be able to repair the God field No, you cannot do this if you don't spend time on it. If I were to ask the question, how old are you spiritually? And if we were to add up all those moments that we did on spiritual work, who here would be older than 3 years? Now, if you can put this and think through what this means, you see what kind of immature spirituality we have at this time and how we have to hothouse it, make it grow. And it won't grow unless we invest time in that. So if you have a Palm PDA, make sure you put God-filled time in there that can be either in davening or in learning or in sharing the Milot Chasadim, but something in which you know that this is the time when I am Nochach B'nei Hashem, I'm in the presence of God. God is watching, God is here at this moment. If I do that, then my soul will be able to grow the years that it needs to grow. Teaching that whatever we are doing has to be like sacrifice. And the question keeps coming on, what is it that God needs sacrifice for? If I go way, way back to the epic of Gilgamesh, he describes he builds an altar and he offers sacrifice, and the strange language he uses there is to say, and the gods came like flies. What does it mean? That there is a hunger, as it were, for our response to the divine. God had a longing, had a passion to dwell with us here below. Someone asked Rabbi Zalman, what kind of a thing is that God has why does he have such a passion? And he answered, aber Teil Friedman can kashes nicht. If there is so deep an existential longing, you can't ask questions about that. There is that divine longing for us. And could you imagine, right now, you're paying attention to me and I'm very glad, but flip a little bit and recognize that we are doing this all in God's vision and that we want to invite God into our consciousness. I think that's the ikar of Jewish meditation. Whether you watch your breathing or not, but that God should be in that meditation, in that, be invited to be in that consciousness. I think that's what's important. Shiviti Hashem v'negdi tamid. So, the sacrifice that empowers God to act in our sphere of life is the time and the consciousness that we invest in there. Oh, it's over here. There was a great Rebbe, the 11th ALEPH, and he wrote a series of books called Nesiva Shalom, and I was so glad to hear today when Saleh mentioned in her Torah words that sacred, the Nesiva Shalom. And in there he speaks mostly about how we need to be in connection with God, we need to be in contact with God, in Dveikut. And then he speaks about our awareness, that we need to be aware of that. And he points out, we don't have a problem in Dveikut to be connected with God. How else would we be breathing? How else would we be here? We are connected. The Creator creates us every moment. We're always being created. So our problem is not that we are separate. Our problem is we are not aware. So, I wanted to meet this tzaddik. So when I was there, not this time, but the time before in Israel, someone made an appointment. I went to see the 11th ALEPH, and when I came to see him, I asked him, Rebbe, I want from you a Gemilas Chesed. It's like a loan. I'm hitting him up for a loan. He says, what's the Gemilas Chesed that you want? And I said, that you should take my hand and that you should recite the sentence. וידעת היום והשבות אל רבך כי יהו אלוהים בשמיים ממעל ולארץ מתחת אין עוד. Know therefore today that Yud Hey Vav Hey is God. In heaven above and earth below, nothing else exists. And I'd like you to do this with your kavanah. Now, why should I want to have him do that? Because the regions inside of us that we have to touch and activate so that they should begin to read, it shouldn't be just words, it's really happening on the spiritual level, what we're doing. That depends to our attunement, depends on our attunement. If I can attune to that vibratory level, where that is, it's like biofeedback, if you will. The Alter Rebbe said, the only way you can learn to daven is from another davener. Because when you stand next to someone who davens, and you attune to that, and you say, I see this guy's getting off on that, so let me see, what do I have to do? And you wiggle inside of yourself until you get it. You get it in body, you get it and you feel it in energy, now I'm there. And then you begin to daven along, and you got it. This is how we attune to one another, because these things cannot be described fully in a book. Do it this way, do it that way. It doesn't go that way. Because we don't have access to that vibratory level unless we pay attention to one who does that. So I asked him to say this sentence. He turns to his secretary and says, I need was versteht was in meines Vollen. Here's a Jew who understands what I've written in my books. He took my hand and held it on his heart and spoke to me for 20 minutes. And just as Nachman in the story of the 7 beggars keeps on saying, and today I give you this as my Rosh Hashanah, I want to make this transmission yours also today. I want to be so expressive, I can't say enough words for that, for the way in which I appreciate the work that Rabbi Neil has done in this new book, Credo of a Modern Kabbalist. Since the 80s, those tapes have been around, and I've wanted so much to give this over to people, because my sense is that what we have there is an antidote to Kabbalah water and other stuff that's on the market. And it's not the first book that you should give to someone on Jewish renewal. I think for that one you should give him the Jewish with feeling. But if someone is already into that and wants to understand what we're talking about, remember the kid saying is above so below? If you want to be able to get to the place that Sfirot will mean something, read that and see how you can apply it, because the application is the important thing. So I want to thank those people. I want to thank everybody who has participated in recording things, making them available. In Thy Light do we see light, and the Simchas Torah work that's been done, and that wonderful DVD that Reb Elat has brought us now of the last ordination. When I think of the time in which one of our colleagues in Boulder was telling us that he had come back from an ordination in Los Angeles, and he said, Oi, how far how far away is east is from the west was how they did it and how we did it. I want to tell you, I didn't get too much a good big ceremony either. I didn't get that initiation. After I was questioned and so on and so forth, they wrote out a smicha, they said, that's all they did. So I wish that you begin to honor and see who we are, because this morning I had the distinct feeling when we were davening that we were the elevator for the prayers of all over America where Jews were davening, including the 7th-day Adventists. You know, that sometimes you need to have, as the Baal Shem Tov pointed out, they came into a shul and he said it's full of prayer. And they said, so what's wrong with that? He said, it's ungestoppt, you know, with prayers that didn't go up. We have to say prayers that will go up. And today, our prayers lifted a lot of prayers from all over America. And I really want to say, if you can let in the nachas that God and the Shekhinah has from the way in which we are doing Yiddishkeit, you'll overcome all kinds of depression and doubt. Sometimes you have to deal with a kind of accusatory demon that's floating around. Jewish renewal. That's just Judaism light. It's not very serious. When we had the meeting on what they call neo-Hasidism, I didn't like that term. I wanted it to be understood as another kind of Hasidism. Because right now, I'm at work on a book describing what I call the fourth turning of Hasidism. Let me try and explain that. From the time that there were the sons of the prophets that are mentioned in the Tanakh, to Elijah, Elisha, and passed on until we got to the intertestamental period and the people in Qumran, which the Talmud calls Hasidim Harishonim, the first Hasidim. Those people were the source of monasticism of the West. Christianity's monastics came out of that group, and the dervishes did too later on, and we began with that. And that was a very wonderful Hasidism in its own way. It was ascetic, though. It was withdrawn from the world. It was for a small elite. The second turning of the wheel of Hasidism came at the time when the grandchildren of the Rambam, following Bahia ibn Bakuda, were going parallel to the Sufis of their day, and parallel to the monastics of the West. Some people who were known as the Friends of God were the people who were known as the Hasidei Ashkenaz, the Hasidim of Germany, of places like the Rhineland too. Ratisbon, Regensburg, is a city where Yehuda HaChassid lived. And that was a wonderful Hasidism, and it gave us a work called Sefer Hasidim, through which we can look at their behavior and their code of ethics that they had, and the way in which they created a technology of the spirit to lift us from merely outer stuff, or merely chitzoniyut, into a pnimiyut, to go inside. And then came, again, a time when Khmelnytsky, the massacres of that time after the expulsion from Spain and the Inquisition. And something else started to grow for us in the Baal Shem Tov, and that was the third turning of the wheel. And at this time, it was a more popular movement. It wasn't only for an elite, it was for everybody. Schuster, Schneider, simple people, great people, and so on. So my sense was that if Jewish renewal will not be connected with the Baal Shem Tov, then we will lack a logon, if you will, you know. We had to be able to have a way of being connected with that, and that's the reason why I went to the Ukraine. So, how wonderful it was to come first to the grave of the Pleb Yitzchak of Berditchev. And with him I had no trouble whatsoever. He has such wonderful teachings in which he is saying some things about the white letters of the Torah. And now when we see the feminist input into the way in which we do Torah, the white letters are beginning to also speak to us, and he was wonderful. In his day, he had made a prayer in Yiddish when Shabbos was over, so that people should say, God von Abraham, von Yitzchak, von Yaakov, Vahit dein Liebvolk Yisrael, in simple Yiddish. When I came to the Baal Shem Tov, they now have a Hamasas Orchim, you have a place where you can stay the night, and I went to mikveh and I davened in the morning, and then I went to the grave with all the notes that people had given to me, and I was praying there. And when I began to pray for plugging in who we are to where he was, I wish I could say it, and if I were to say it in the language of Midrash, I would say that the Baal Shem Tov said to me, okay? But I don't want you to go woo-woo and have sort of a ghost coming out. It wasn't like this. I think it's the same way as it happened at Matan Torah, you know, a consciousness arose in me, in which the Baal Shem Tov, as it were, showed me that there is a flow that comes from God. And this flow gets us to respond. And there is a flow back, so it is like alternating current between us and between God. And that energizes everything that we do in relation to being with God. And then some people come and they say, we need to dam this up. It's not for everybody. It should be for only those people who follow this, who believe that. You see how it got narrower and narrower and narrower, and then there are some people whom we didn't appoint, who have appointed themselves to be the ones who give the hechsher as to who can get something from that flow and who cannot. So the Baal Shem Tov showed me that he dug a channel so that the flow could be reopened again. And as it were, he said to me, you're doing the same thing. The flow was cut off, it was dammed, and you came and you opened things up. You're a good successor to what I started. And I felt that at that moment I got smicha from the Baal Shem Tov. And all of you who have ever received smicha through Ohala, I want you to know that you can count this as part of your chain of transmission from now on. It's also buried there, that Avraham Yeshua Eshel. I love the phrase that he uses when he says, B'ha'ir lei b'sum seichel. When the heart is aroused and you put your mind to it. And I asked him for the bracha, that whenever I open my mind to something, that my heart should be aroused to that too. I had a feeling he gave it willingly. We went to the Maggid of Mezrich afterwards in Anipoli. The Maggid did something that was not found in the Kabbalah works before, and which was his very special gift to the Hasidic movement, that he spoke of Kadmut HaSeichel. He spoke of that level of awareness that precedes awareness. And he made that accessible to his students. He didn't require that his students should do a particular, wear a particular outfit, all of them look the same way. In fact, if you look at the disciples of the Maggid, each one was altogether different, and there was a tree started to grow out to many branches from the Maggid. And he gave me this bracha, the people who will be coming through, what we are doing here, will all branch out, and nobody's going to be like the other one. And that's good. That's good. I like the fact that we had concurrent services. I walk by and see the people do the Modanim to the yoga posture. Oh, it's giving gesund. That was so good, so wonderful. And everybody else who had whatever minion they had, and was great. What is Kadmut HaSeichel? When you look at the way in which the last election worked out, you get a sense that it doesn't make any sense. could this have happened that way? Was everybody blind? And they come and tell us that there was a frame that was established. That frame is prior to awareness. That's the Kadmut HaSeichel. The reason why that not every Jew considers himself a Jew, because we have lost our dream, we have lost our Kadmut HaSeichel, we have lost our myth, and we have to rebuild that Kadmut HaSeichel. We have to consciously work. We have done Tikkun Olam on so many levels already, but now we have to go into the subtle spaces to create the Tikkun Olam so that we have a better frame for us Jews and for the world to send that frame out. And one of the aspects of that frame is that we are all part of the living earth, that we are all part of our Mother, the living earth. And once you get that straight, then ego cannot say anything more but the best way in which I can serve the planet is to be a cell connected with her, our mother, and not a cell, a rogue cell like a cancer. And if I start to look around the world today, I will see so many rogue cells sapping the strength of our life here on this planet. So the subtle work of framing the Maggid of message was the one who pushed that to me. Next to him was Reb Zusha. There was a friend that I had in Chicago. The hard drive doesn't want to come up with the name, so what can I do? He was so special. And one of the stories I dedicated in the Dream Assembly to him. When he would tell the story of Reb Zusha, he would begin like this. When the Maggid of Mezrich would begin to teach, and he would say, and God spoke, Reb Zusha went, and God spoke, and God spoke, and God spoke. And they had to take him out. so that the Maggid could continue teaching. I want to say, in the Reb Zusha's name, let's get excited again over the fact that God spoke, that the Infinite decided to communicate with us. We went to Reb Pinchas of Chorus in Shebetovka. Reb Pinchas is the one who says it so beautifully, because he is a person for us who could be the one on whom we can build a transpersonal sociology. Reb Chava, Weisler, where are you? Hey, Yashikoyach. We'll talk some more about that, transpersonal sociology. Because he says like this, what happens if I want to pray for somebody else that he should become better? What right have I got to interfere with the other person's choice? God will not take away the choice from the person, so what does it mean I pray? So he says, what is God? God is the collective of all souls. Doesn't it sound like toward the one, the perfection of love and harmony and beauty, the only being united with all the illuminated souls? And he's saying all that is God. And each one of us in particular have everybody else in us. Talk about quantum Hasidus, quantum Kaplan, okay? And then he says, when I pray for him to change, since I have him in me, the him in me becomes better. And because I pray for him, the me in him becomes better. Then it's so much easier for the him and him to change. Now that sense of connectedness that Reb Pinchas was teaching us is so wonderful, and I'd like to commend it to you too. Afterwards, we went to Reb Nosson, the disciple of Reb Nachman in Wrocław, climbing up. We You have to go up high up until you come to his graveside. And he is a very sparse person. He didn't tell stories and he didn't make up nigunim, but what he did was to make clear what Reb Nachman hinted at. So he was saying, inquire deeply into what you learn. Inquire deeply, take it apart. One of the things that Reb Nosson has done for me is that I can't read Reb Nachman anymore just on the surface. I got to go a little bit deeper and ask the question, how do I live that? How do I live that? Because Reb Nosson was the one who took the teachings of Reb Nachman and turned them into prayer. If you got a good teaching, you have to turn that teaching into prayer, otherwise it doesn't work. And then, when I came to Reb Nachman in Uman, Reb Nachman just kept on repeating, Gewalt Yidden seid doch nicht mehr Yaesh. Don't despair. Don't despair. Despair doesn't exist. There are moments when even the chemicals that should lift depression from us don't work anymore. Because not all depression is coming as somatic, comes from our body. A lot of depression comes from the politics and the environment and so on and so forth. So when Nachman says, Gewalt Yidden seid doch nicht mehr Yaesh, don't give up hope. It's a narrow bridge, but you must not despair. So when I'm teaching people in spiritual eldering, I tell them the following. One of the reasons why we don't like to die, I mean among other reasons, is that when you start thinking that that accumulation of awareness that we had in a lifetime, that would go down the tubes and somehow it wouldn't become shared with the rest of the world. That would be such a thing to grieve at this point. So I explain to people, imagine I'm typing away on my computer and it's getting really good and I'm on a run after the ideas are coming so very fast, and then all of a sudden there's an outage of electricity and I haven't saved the file. Do you know that feeling in the belly? Yeah. That's like the feeling of having to die without being saved. I want to tell you something. I'm feeling, Baruch Hashem, that a lot of me is saved. A lot of me is saved. And what Yesod and Legacy is doing and what Aleph is doing, a lot more of me is going to be available as saved. And that feels just wonderful. So I'm coming now to the end of what I want to say. But that is going to take a little while. And you introduced me so well and so good and so extensively, so I still will run over the time a little bit. If I could, I would so want to make available that thing that I want to have saved to every one of you. And if I look at the computer model, I want to really upload on you everything that I can. If we could be, at this point, joined telepathically. This morning in the davening was so wonderful. There were some moments when, if you think of how, when you need to do a fantastic amount of number crunching, you don't use a supercomputer anymore. You use parallel processors that you set alongside a connection machine, 4,000 CPUs doing the thing at the same time in order to get it done. Can you imagine if all of us were to be able to go to that place where the Rebbe was saying to me that sentence, and I want to just give that to you too. How would I go about doing that? Well, first of all, I'd like to have your willingness. I promise you that I don't send any viruses along with this invitation. What you're going to get if you want it and if you're open to it is the software that you will be able to boot up when I no longer will be available on this plane for you to do that. So if you're prepared to do that, we'll do it. Now sit up straight. I want you, no, sit, please. I want you to breathe with me the following way. When I raise my hand, you will breathe in, and I will breathe out. When I lower my hand, you will breathe out, and I will breathe in. Okay? We'll do this 10 times, so that in these 10 packets, I can send you that software that you can boot up, God willing, whenever you will need it. So, more. Amen. And y'all, let's sit quiet for a little bit so you can push the enter button to save it. And now I'd like to ask you to turn to your neighbor and to say one word by which you will be able to retrieve what you have loaded on your computer now. Speak to each other and say one word which will help you remember. Richard will forgive me if I will be the Hazzan for this one. But I want to say what wonderful nachas your davening is giving me in the way in which you have spread davenology on that level to people and given them a cheshik, a juiciness, a geschmack, you know, and leaving davening and getting other people to daven along with you. It is so wonderful. So now I want to have a poem from you. Minor Yiratzon von Echo Adonai Eloheinu v'Elahei Haveinu Shetechadish Aleinu, that you renew for us this month for goodness and for blessing.
ותיתן לנו חיים ארוכים, חיים של שלום, חיים של טוב, חיים של ברכה, חיים של פרנסה. חיים חיים של חיות רצון מועד, חיים שיש בהם יראת שמיים ויראת חטא, חיים שאין בהם בושות לימון. A life in which we don't have to apologize for who we are, a life in which we have the comforts of life, a life in which we will feel a love for Torah and a respect for God, a life that will fulfill all the things our heart demands. Let this be answered to us for the merit of our prayer together, and let us say, Amen. Mi shasanitzim lo'ovenu v'gal otanu v'chevut, hu yigal otanu v'kavod, v'yikabez midachenu me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, chaverim kol Yisrael v'nomar Amen. Rosh Chodesh Av, Yom Shabbos Kodesh Av Aleinu al Kol Yisrael L'Tova. Yechadshei HaKodesh Baruch Hu Aleinu V'yal Kolano Beit Yisrael L'Tova V'Libracha. Let's resolve, let's sing. Like you were saying, I started on the wrong note. We're going to set it up a little bit better. Na 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 na. Yeah, da di da di da 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 di da da. Yeah, Hachay HaKodesh Baruch Hu Aleinu v'yam Kolano Beit Yisrael L'Tova V'Libracha. Amen, amen. V'sasa v'sing. Amen. Li Yeshua u'Mechama. Amen. L'Parasa Tova u'Chalkala. Amen. L'Chaim Tovim u'L'Shalom. Amen. L'Shmuas Tovos. Amen. L'Bsoros Tovos. Amen. L'Shamim Be'itam. Amen. Especially in those places that are arid and that need rain like Colorado. For Shalema, especially for Paulo. L'Ekula Karova. Mashiach wird kommen heim ins Jahr, like we're singing. I wanted to sing a special Kaddish at this point, and I couldn't quite remember. Richard, are you here? Come ahead. Yitkadash Shemerabot. The end of Kabbalah, remember the end of that Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbos? Yes. So help me out. So No, I've lost it. Okay, I'm giving in. It's Debbie Friedman. Yitgadal ve'yitgadal shemera ve'yalemah dibrach yerubei ve'yamelim lachutei ve'yamelim lachutei switch bechayecho ve'yomei ובחייך בית ישראל אנחנו בזמן קרוב וימרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לילמו ליומי המחיה וישתבח ויתבחר ויתרומן ויתנשא ויתעלה 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 שמי קודשה וקודשו בריחו לאלה מכל ברכת ושירת הקדוש בחרת ונחמת ואמירם ויולמה וימרו אמן יהי שמם רבה מן שמיה בחיים טובים עלינו ויעל כל ישראל וימרו אמן וימרו אמן עושה שלום במרומהו יעשה שלום עלינו ויעל כל ישראל וימרו Amen. And now you're going to hug each other while I go back to the Merkava. Le'ela mikol birchata ve'shirata הקדוש בחרת ונחמתה ואמירם ויולמה וימרו אמן יהי שמם רבה מן שמיה בחיים טובים עלינו ויעל כל ישראל וימרו אמן וימרו אמן עושה שלום במרומהו יעשה שלום עלינו ויעל כל ישראל וימרו